You know, a lot of people they criticize the success or failure of a wrestling show, a wrestling booker, a promoter, people's careers, but and obviously that goes to like the biggest companies. You know, you'll always have people who talk about WCW was so big, how did they let it go? And then WWF was so big, and now today they're making money, but the quality's not the same, the wrestlers aren't the same, and all these things, and so on and so forth. But one company I don't think I've ever I might have never done a video on them on this channel, and that's Ring of Honor. Now, Ring of Honor, for those who don't know or need a refresher or just enjoy the history, Ring of Honor is a promotion that came about after WCW fell apart and after ECW went out of business. And at that particular time, all you had was Vince McMahon's wrestling, and that turned out to be a nightmare for the rest of history. But Ring of Honor, as well as TNA, they kind of they did not fill the void, which you couldn't expect them to. They did not fill the void missing of WCW and ECW, but it did have its place. And you're at the point where Ring of Honor began in 2002, and now we're headed into 2026 as I record this. And Ring of Honor, as it once was, not the same. It's basically another AEW show that they're pretending is a separate company. It's not. But Ring of Honor is at a point where you can look back at it and you can tell the story of it and the history of it. And I was just thinking, did Ring of Honor, did it become a promotion that you look at historically as successful? Or would you label it a failure? Now, some people might say, well, if a company is not in business technically, then it failed. But many businesses go out of business. Because you went out of business does not mean you failed. No, some businesses are around for 100 years, some are around for 5 years, some are around for a certain period of time. But in the time you existed, was it a success? Now, financially, it may not have been, but I'm looking past that. When I say, was Ring of Honor a success or failure, did it serve its purpose? Because like I said, it came along after WCW. It came along after ECW. And if ECW, especially if ECW didn't go out of business, there might not have been a need for a Ring of Honor. Because although Ring of Honor was not as entertaining, in my opinion, as ECW, it did fill a void, and it did have, the ECW influence in ways. You had Gabe Sapolsky and Feinstein, who were, they were in ECW. They were, video crew and certain things like that. Sapolsky, I think he used to help set up the events and the chairs and things. And they were around Heyman, and they saw the inside. They were around Dreamer and things like that. So they were obviously influenced by ECW and Heyman. And when you look at Ring of Honor, was it a success as far as serving a purpose? And I'll say it was, because when you look at wrestling after WCW, after ECW, all you had is Vince McMahon. And even if McMahon had all the money in the world, which he did, he wasn't going to take everybody. He wasn't going to sign everybody. And especially at that time, Vince McMahon, who'd always been this way, but especially then, he loved the Giants. And WWF for a long time was known as the land of the Giants. So he would sign a Tajiri, but he'd sign a Tajiri to be a comedy act. You're a little Japanese guy who does kicks. Let's put you with Tori Wilson. Let's put you with William Regal. And the comedy was great. I thought it was very funny. McMahon would try to humiliate you, but sometimes it was entertaining or funny. But then at some point, the humiliation, it went on forever, and it just killed your character off. I loved Tajiri in 2001 during the invasion. I thought he was great. But there comes a point where he kind of didn't matter when you got to 03, 04, and he was just another guy, and then he eventually was released and whatever. So McMahon, he would take you and make a joke of you and forget about you, and he only cared about his main eventers. And that's a big difference between Heyman, because Heyman presented Tajiri as much more serious. Heyman presented most of his wrestlers as more serious fighters than comedic gimmicks. But Ring of Honor, it filled a void of McMahon is not going to take you seriously if you're under 6 feet tall. But Ring of Honor was about great technicians and very long matches and respect. You had to, shake the hand before the match and things like that. And if you look back at Ring of Honor now, a lot of the biggest names in wrestling the last 10 years, they came through Ring of Honor. They got their name there. They were built there. Now, you can also say Ring of Honor may have failed wrestling because of the same thing I just said. A lot of the stars the last 10 years are from Ring of Honor, but a lot of these people, when they're on top, this is when the ratings fall and interest falls. So if you look at 2012 and even, longer than 10 years, let's say the last 15 years, a lot of the top names are Ring of Honor stars. CM Punk, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins, Bryan Danielson. So in a way, Ring of Honor created the next class of wrestlers you would have, but that same class, they were not draws on the biggest level. So was Ring of Honor successful, or was it a failure when it comes to serving a purpose? To me, it's successful because it kind of filled up the rosters of wrestling companies, but then it was kind of a failure because a lot of these guys were just that, technical wrestlers who were small, who didn't really draw. And then you had a period where you kind of had the clash of the two. You had like the indie style, and then you had like the McMahon style. So that's when you get the audience starting to take over the shows, and we only want Bryan Danielson, but we hate Roman Reigns. We like Moxley because he was on the indies, and we like Rollins because he's on the indies, but we don't like Ryback. So you kind of have an ROH audience that's now the WWE audience with that ROH mindset. We only want long matches and short wrestlers. We don't like big monsters. But that leads to your audience is dwindling, and you have to cater to these people, but these people are never happy. Because that's another big thing about the ROH audience. The ROH audience is the internet audience, as was ECW. But the ROH audience, which is the internet audience, which is the Meltzer audience, everything is critical and 4.25 stars, and we don't like women being used as sexually. They have to be hideous and do German suplexes. So we don't like women. We don't like pudding matches. We don't we don't like giants. We don't like gimmicks. We don't like charisma. We just want long matches. So was Ring of Honor successful, or was it a failure when it came to serving a purpose in wrestling? AJ Styles came from Ring of Honor. Many names. Christopher Daniels. They were in Ring of Honor at some point or another. Um, Austin Aries, Chris Hero, Cesaro. Many countless names. But were they successful in serving a purpose? It's kind of, I guess the answer is kind of based on your perspective of how you think wrestling should be, or your personal preference. So leave your answer in the comment section. And I was just thinking about this because Ring of Honor was something where I never really got into it. Ring of Honor, it was, for the most part, it was a company that you kind of had to be like super, super into it on the internet, and you had to go to the shows. They never really had a real TV deal. I think around '09 they got HD Net, but how many people had HD Net? And then I remember seeing it, and like the production quality was like so horrible. It's like, I don't even want to watch this. And you know, Cornette helped them get the TV deal with syndication on Sinclair. And around that time is when they had, Kevin Owens, who I thought was, you know, like I said earlier, a lot of these ROH guys, they did not really make an impact on the bigger level. And I think Kevin Steen is a great example. I thought Kevin Steen was 10 million times better as Kevin Steen than he was Kevin Owens. And they've pushed him so hard as Kevin Owens, but to me, he's like a shell of his former self. And they've given him chance after chance after chance. And I think he fell off ever since he joined the company. I thought he was tremendous in 2010, 2011 when he was feuding with Cornette and Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, and he was tremendous. But then he gets to WWE and he's just a pale sock puppet. Chris Hero, I thought Chris Hero was great. For years, I thought, why don't they sign Chris Hero? But then, because Chris Hero, I think Chris Hero was like what 6'4", 6'5". He had the height, but he didn't have a physique, so that was probably it. But I thought he was a good talker. I thought he was a good wrestler. But then he gets to WWE, and then he tries to put on weight, but it went to his gut, and then he just looked like a oh, Chris Hero, just a disastrous signing. Like, so I don't know, like Chris Hero, like to me, he's wasted potential. I thought there was a period when Chris Hero was like the best indie wrestler because he could talk, he had the size, he didn't have a physique, but he did have the height, and he was a good wrestler. He could wrestle with anybody. I thought Chris Hero was great for years and years and years, but it definitely did not work out as far as him having a superstar career. I always thought Bryan Danielson was overrated. I still think he's overrated. I've never saw it in Bryan Danielson. People saying he's so great and he's the best. I've never saw it. I've always thought Danielson was boring. I never he's such a great technician. Like I don't see it. I don't see it. I think he was very boring, very methodical. Like to me, he's no comparison to Chris Benoit. You want to talk about technical wrestling? Danielson, he don't compare in any way to Benoit or Bret Hart or Kurt Angle. I just never seen. I just always thought he was overrated. Um, did I say that yet? Hit the like button. Did I say that yet? Hit the like button. Subscribe to this channel. I've never seen it. Now there was a time when he got very over, but he got very over because the audience had turned into internet marks who we hate Roman Reigns, but we want Danielson. So he got over kind of as like we're revolting against the company, and then they pushed him, and then they like took away his push, and then they re-pushed him, but then he started having like concussions, and that went to a disaster. So it's like these ROH guys, when they finally got a push, it went to nothing. CM Punk got his push, but then they kind of didn't really push him. He's the champion, but then like he's not main eventing pay-per-views. Cena is, and then he quits the company, and then the whole AEW fiasco. Now he's in the company. He's crying and hugging Stephanie McMahon. He's a sellout. So these ROH guys, like when they got to the highest level, it never really went anywhere like you think it would. Austin Aries, another one. Austin Aries, a malcontent, an egomaniac. He's self-destructed on many occasions. Tremendous talent. Austin Aries, great talent. He's undersized, but great talent. Good high flyer, good technician, very good talker, charismatic, but he has personality problems. Another one, Teddy Hart. I thought Teddy Hart was great, but Teddy Hart is a maniac. I think Teddy Hart might be the most entertaining wrestler in the last 25 years, but he's Teddy Hart, so he was never even got the real. He was never going to get the chance. He had his chance. He was signed to WWF in '98, but he ruined that by being Teddy Hart. And then, but if Teddy Hart, was like disciplined, he'd be the biggest star in wrestling because he had the most innovative moves, great high flyer, great charisma, great personality. To me, Teddy Hart, he could have fit in with like the Click. Like to me he was Scott Hall-ish in more ways than one. Kevin Nash loves him, so that tells you something. But to me, like he was like a Click member. Like it's funny, he's Teddy Hart, but he was much more like the Shawn Michaels Click than the Owen Hart Bret Hart Click. But I don't know. But what are your thoughts? Do you think ROH succeeded as far as serving a purpose then to now, or do you think it failed because their guys got to the top, but it didn't really expand wrestling? You could say it kind of killed wrestling because you bring in this era of little vanilla midgets, and look at where the audience is now. Raw's doing a 1.6. Anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments, like the video, share the video, subscribe to this channel. If you want to support the channel, if you enjoy my commentary, if you enjoy my content, you can donate to the Cash App or the Venmo. It's XDN Online. Also, you can super chat here on YouTube. I'm up out of here, and that is it.